telling all sides of the story. This is The Rita Cosby Show.
It's time to sort of stop the politicking, guys. It is time to not worry if it's a Democratic policy or if it's a Republican policy or it doesn't matter whose policy it is. It's time to look for the safety of citizens in our cities. Because guess what? If they don't feel safe, it doesn't matter what political party you are. And I just hope the anger that we hear from not just the police union, but that we hear now from the mayor and we hear from the NYPD commissioner, because crime is just so bad, and especially violent crime in a major city like New York City, the crossroads of the world. Well, guess what? You better get a handle on it soon because you're the mayor. And it's time to start. Here's my philosophy. It's time to start pulling in people and saying, you know what? Stop with your policies. Let's fix it. And if you can't fix it, I'm going to make sure I push you out of office. And I'm talking to people like Alvin Bragg. And I'm talking about also, the legislature and these other people. Yes, these people are independently voted, but you can certainly put a little pressure on, whether it's publicly or privately, and just make their life awfully miserable and start calling out names saying, I would have liked to have done this, but guess who's blocking me? Blank, blank, and blank. I bet you 99% of New Yorkers would be out there cheering to see that kind of frankness. And certainly Pat Lynch, head of the police union, certainly would be, because he is fed up with these repeat offenders. Take a listen. Here he is last night at one of the press conferences after that cop was shot.
The perps don't care where that bullet rounds. Today, it landed on a police officer. Tomorrow, will it be your child at the bus stop? Will it be you going to work? Will it be you standing on your stoop?
And how sad is that? Because there has been so much random crime of late. And, again, I would have done it on day one. I would have been screaming to the rooftops. You guys know me. I would have been out there. I would have been calling out names. And I would have also said, hey, guess what? I was elected to clean up New York. I was elected to fix New York and make sure New York is safe. I'm the new sheriff in town, the new mayor in town, and here's what's going to happen. And there is just this swath between the rhetoric and then yet, on the other hand, guess what? He's not the one who puts them back out on the streets. That's the judges. That's the DAs. And it's not just New York City. I mean, there's so many cities around the country. There's LA, there's Philly, there's San Fran, where you've got these soft on crime DAs. So bad, by the way, remember the other day we had John Hatami, the deputy DA, who is pushing for a recall of his boss. Imagine this. Would you ever imagine in modern times? But he is pushing for a recall of his boss, George Gascon, who makes, Alvin Bragg look like John Wayne. And he is saying enough, that he feels his boss is a danger to society because he's letting people out. And there are repeat offenders, like gang leaders and all these others. The one guy in the jail saying, Gascon's my hero. I'm going to put a tattoo of his face, on my body. I just think he's the greatest guy in the world. I mean, it's bad when a gang leader is praising you. And I'm sure there's a couple that are praising Alvin Bragg. So take a listen. Here is Mayor Eric Adams last night again at the press conference after another cop was shot, saying he's had it.
I'm tired of the complaints about the officers who are doing their job. We put these officers on the front line, father and son on the front line. And these officers being on the front line, we're spending more attention critiquing their actions. Let's critique the actions of those who are committing the crimes in this city. That's what we should be critiquing. That's where my attention is.
And I say bravo. But two things. First off, this is the same mayor, remember, who told people recently, if you see cops hanging around the subway and they're looking at their phone too much, take a picture of it and send it to me. Like, that's a good use of his time. And you want people like trying to snitch on a cop. And by the way, it turns out the cops are using their cell phones, remember, for work. And he didn't even really understand that. So that's a whole other issue. But you can't on one hand say, hey, let's try to keep an eye on the cops and what they're doing, Joe Blows, send in stuff, snitch on a cop. And I can't wait. I'll listen to your email. I'll go to the precinct the next day. when there's shootings and all these horrible, violent crimes going on? Why would you do that? You can't send these mixed messages, Mayor Eric Adams. You can't. And that anger that I just heard from you there, I say bravo. But what he should be doing is bringing that anger also to DA Alvin Bragg's office and bringing it to the legislature and everybody who is putting these repeat offenders back on the streets. Why is he losing his cool with the public and not losing his cool with them? I mean, to me, fix the problem. This is a thug problem and get a handle on it. Here's a little bit more of him losing his cool last night.
Who the hell will protect the innocent New Yorkers in this city? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. It is time for us to stop spending our energy protecting people who are committing crimes and violence. This person has an extensive arrest history. He has made up his mind he was not going to stop until he took the life of an innocent person.
And listen, I'm glad to see him furious. And when I read this guy's background, I'm furious too. Here's a little bit about this latest character, and I don't even want to call him man, I'll just say character. 25-year-old Rameek Smith, who is no longer with us, and that's because Rameek Smith, after a brief chase with law enforcement, he fired twice at the NYPD, the greatest force in the world, and then they shot him fatally in the head. He had shot during exchange gunfire. He shot a cop in the leg. Thank goodness, again, that cop has been released from the hospital. But here's a little bit of background about this 25-year-old character. 2016, he's given 5 years probation for robbery conviction. March 2020, he's arrested after he jumped a subway turnstile. And cops found a handgun on him, a .32 caliber handgun on him at the time. Then in December 2021, he's arrested on his own recognizance, like he's an upstanding citizen. He pleads guilty, and they still release him on his own recognizance. And then his sentencing had been delayed twice. He was due back in court next month. So my question is, how many passes does somebody get? How many times does somebody like this, if you look at his background, you go, oh, this guy is clearly a violent offender, and he's clearly not getting the message. But guess why he's not getting the message? Because these soft on crime judges and DAs are letting people like this out over and over again. Somebody's caught with an illegal gun, and then they're caught again with another illegal gun, and then they're caught again with a different illegal gun. Guess what? That could be a red flag. You know, to me, this is so over the top and so outrageous. And I'm glad that the mayor is speaking out. What about the cops that were shot? Remember Wilbert Mora and Jason Rivera? That guy had a rap sheet a mile long. It was like on and on and on and on. And all the different cases. Remember the one in the Burger King, too. All of these recent cases in New York, the signs were blaring. And I want to hear that anger that we just heard from Mayor Eric Adams. I want to hear him unleash it on the DA, and I want to hear him unleash it on the people who are letting these people out. Because cops are arresting them over and over again, and then they get back out. It is ridiculous. 1-800-848-9222. 1-800-848-9222. Let's go to Shea on line 7. Shea, your thoughts about all this?
How are you, Rita?
Good. I'm good, but I'm fired up because I'm glad to hear Mayor Eric Adams. I want him to be successful, and I think he's saying a lot of the right things, but I want to see the actions to follow it up.
So let me fill in my perspective. Actually, I was with the mayor 2 weeks ago, and he gave a speech in Brooklyn for the 100-day celebration. And obviously, I'm a straight Republican. I've been with the president. I met presidents from several times. It was definitely a sigh of relief to hear his speech, when he called out bail reform yesterday and all that. But more has to be done. Speaking words is very nice, but it has to be action. You know what I'm saying? Like, what I would like to see is that if the bail reform is not going to be changed, meaning if he speaks and he can't get it done in Albany, he should really come out publicly and say, that I'm not endorsing Governor Hochul and call her out and say, listen, the governor has to take more action to get the legislator and the Senate in Albany to get rid of bail reform law. You know what I'm saying? He has to speak up even more than he did yesterday.
I agree. I agree. And Shea, what I think is really powerful is he says, and he said it from day one, yeah, we got to clamp down on crime. We're going to take back our city. It's the greatest city. We're going to reemerge, all the right things. And he has the experience as a former cop and legislator and all that stuff. But you're right. He needs to start, if they're not going to do anything, he needs to start calling them out. And even Governor Hochul, you know, when she was asked about Alvin Bragg, she said, well, I'm going to give him a little bit of slack and let's see where things go. Well, when you're dealing with a crisis like crime is and these shootings of cops that are happening indiscriminately across the country, you can't cut too much slack. I don't think, you know, New Yorkers or good upstanding citizens want any slack. And that's why it's time. I agree with you. And who would you start him calling out, Shea? Who would you put on the top of the list real quick?
He should call out immediately the governor, Stuart Cousins, the leader of the Senate, and the Assembly Speaker, and say straight out.
What about Bragg? What about Bragg? Alvin Bragg?
Obviously, Alvin Bragg should be removed from office. That's a separate topic. It's insane that he wanted to allow people to go into stores and shoplift and get away with it. It's total insanity. I don't even know how such a person can even be elected as a district attorney in any state or city.
It is. It's shocking. It's shocking. Shea, thank you very much. Great perspective. I'm so glad you called into the show. We were just talking the other day about some of the statistics that were put out by police unions across the country. More officers have been ambushed in the last year than ever before. And the job of being a cop is more difficult, more risky, more tenuous, and sadly, more deadly. And many of them, and again, ambush attacks where they were shot in their vehicle or while they were on patrol doing something and suddenly ambush. It is a very risky profession, and it is so important right now that their profession is honored and appreciated and respected. And last night, NYPD Commissioner Keechant Sewell described what happened to one cop when two cops were out chasing this suspect, 25-year-old Rameek Smith, a career criminal, and suddenly things got very dangerous. Take a listen.
Our two officers were patrolling in uniform in their police vehicle near 3822 3rd Avenue when they observed a male on the east sidewalk of 3rd Avenue. One officer exited the vehicle, approached the male, and he immediately began to run. With the officer on foot and his partner still in the vehicle, they chased the male to the vicinity of Bathgate Avenue and Claremont Parkway. As the male continued running north on Bathgate Avenue, there was an exchange of gunfire between the officers and the suspect. During the incident, one officer was struck in the left arm and the male was struck in the head.
Wow. Very serious stuff. It just shows how things can change in an instant. And this guy, this convict, never should have been out. What was he doing on the out? You look at his rap sheet. He is a repeat offender who got a free pass for years upon years. Take a listen. Here's a little more from the NYPD police commissioner.
Tonight, we are extremely fortunate that our officer is here at Lincoln Hospital recovering after being shot by a dangerous criminal who should not have been on the streets of the Bronx or anywhere else.
So when are people like the NYPD commissioner and the mayor going to get really tough? And I'm talking about not just shouting passionately and saying we got to defend our police, we got to lock up these thugs. All great words. But now let's start calling some of these people out and saying enough, because you can sit and say, speak it to high heaven, but unless the legislature changes the policy, unless they can have influence on them or on the DAs, guess what? It's going to just keep on happening. So take a listen. Here is Mayor Eric Adams last night, I think so emotional and angry about this revolving door.
New Yorkers deserve better. We took 2,600 guns off our streets. And the shooters of those guns are back on our streets just like this person here. Under normal circumstances, you will see a decrease in crime in the city. But the same criminals are continuing to come out in our streets, committing violence over and over again.
And I'm happy to hear that he mentioned criminals, not just the guns, because too often I am so fed up with so many Democratic politicians saying we need more gun control without any mention about the violent criminals who are actually pulling the guns. Because guess what? Those people are not going through the legal paths anyway. It doesn't always matter how you crack down on it because they're going to get the guns. They're doing it illegally. That's the whole point of being a criminal. But you have to go after the person pulling the trigger or pushing the person into the train or stabbing somebody or doing something like that. The violent offender. It's not just about guns. It's about thugs. I always kind of make the distinction. It's not gun control. It's thug control. You can certainly get illegal guns off the streets. That's a noble mission. But you got to also make sure you lock up the perpetrator. You can't forget that part of the loop. And guess what? Last year, there were about 4,000 illegal guns taken off the streets. So right now, it's par for the course. It's a little bit more than last year, but not that much more. So we got to go after these criminals who continue to do it over and over again. And I'm waiting to see when Mayor Adams may call out Alvin Bragg, the DA. When is that going to happen? When is he going to say, here's the list of people that are saying XXXXX that are blocking our streets from being safe? They know who the people are. They're repeat offenders. So what are you going to do? Well, with all these protests that were going on, everybody's saying, okay, when is the Department of Justice going to finally crack down and saying, don't protest outside of these justices' homes? Don't do it. It's not smart. Things are going to get out of hand. It's not appropriate. It is against the law. There is a federal law that says you cannot protest on a judge's premises, their private property, even technically outside of the court within a certain amount. And you're not supposed to do it to influence a decision. Remember, it was the Supreme Court leak. And of course, they're trying to influence the decision. So you could be arresting everybody. And that was after their addresses were put out there publicly. It was horrible. And there was nothing said for over a week from Biden, from Circleback Psaki, from the Justice Department. Well, finally tonight, the Department of Justice came down and Merrick Garland instructed the U.S. Marshal Service to help ensure justices' safety. The U.S. Marshals are in charge of security. Some of the Marshal Services will beefing them up now and making sure that they are, quote, keeping an eye on the justices' safety. I don't know if that means that they will be moving back people or what they're going to do, but he's at least directing them to somehow step in and protect the justices. Isn't it amazing? It took over a week for him to say something as innocuous as this. Well, here's my thought of as to why he kind of did this, because Governor Glenn Youngkin, remember the superstar who won the governorships there in Virginia, after talking about, by the way, the Department of Justice going after parents. Remember that whole deal? They couldn't wait to go after parents who were critical of critical race theory and all that other stuff. This Justice Department, and they answer that in a second. But yet this, deciding whether to give security to Supreme Court justices, they seem to be wavering on, and then they realize, oh my gosh, I got to come out and say something. Well, Governor Youngkin, I think, pressed the mark, and I think kind of put some pressure on A.G. Garland because he and the governor of Maryland, because a lot of the justices live in Virginia or in Maryland, right there, right near D.C., and they basically wrote a letter to A.G. Garland and said, we are demanding that you increase security around the justices. And if you don't, we're going to send in the state troopers and the local police to make sure that there's a perimeter far away from their house. In other words, nobody's going to cross that perimeter line. And if they do, then they will be into obstruction or trespassing. A million things that they can go after. And they finally said, we're going to put some pressure on you. So I kind of think A.G. Garland had his hands tied and said this innocuous thing. It doesn't necessarily say he's going to create a perimeter or do any of these other things, but he did say we are going to beef up security. Isn't that amazing? On something as basic as that it took him this long. What is wrong with this administration? Boy, are their priorities so out of whack. Well, here is Governor Glenn Youngkin talking about his message to the AG that I think pressed the AG to finally respond.
This leak was done in order to influence and, oh, by the way, to intimidate our justices. And that's exactly what these parades and picket lines and demonstrators are trying to do, is influence and intimidate our justices. It's on the federal books that, in fact, that's punishable with up to a year in prison. And therefore, Governor Hogan and I have asked the Attorney General to do his job and enforce this law.
Isn't that amazing that this Justice Department couldn't wait to go after parents treating them as domestic terrorists, and yet they had to be basically pressed to protect the highest justices in our country? That's amazing. And that comes on the heels of Eric Adams saying enough of the crime in New York City. And we still have a soft on crime DA who's like, oh, is there a problem with somebody who's had like 5 or 6 violent crimes? Don't we want to give them a chance? What about giving New York City a chance to come back? You think people are going to want to come back with these skyrocketing crime rates? 1-800-848-9222. 1-800-848-9222. Let's go back to Pete on line 2. Pete, go ahead. Sorry to keep you holding.
I read it. Yeah, to keep on subject with the mayor. Hopefully Sunday I'll have a word with him. I was a Curtis supporter. He knew that and everything, but we still managed to stay friends.
Now, what are you going to say? What are you going to say to the mayor if you see him?
I'm going to ask him why, with his police experience, which I know of, would he even handcuff these police that they can't do their job? They have to be afraid to do their job. They got to watch for their pension. They can't get involved with things off duty, and they're being handcuffed. They're being filmed by people. And, you know, when you film people, you could edit it. I mean, I was a stagehand for 40 years. You could edit anything.
And also, not only that, Pete, I didn't like the idea. I like when I hear, you know, Mayor Eric Adams' anger about repeat offenders and enough, that's correct. I didn't like when he came out and talked about telling people if they see a cop on a subway, film it, make sure you take a picture, send me the picture, and then I'll go down to the precinct the next day. I'm thinking, at a time where crime is skyrocketing and the numbers all show that, and even the mayor's attesting to it, he attested to it last night, how does that help the situation that you're trying to create people to take pictures of cops and film cops? I mean, how does that build confidence in the police force? That only causes more friction. It's like mixed messages, Pete.
That's terrible. I mean, being a police officer today is, it's not a thankful job. I mean, you're not appreciated. It's a horror show. I have members of my family that are on the job, and the stories that they tell me are atrocious, you know. But you see, Eric, I got a little faith in him now, but he's doing a little better, all right?
Oh, absolutely. And look, I want him to be, I agree with you, by the way, and I want him to be extremely successful for the city. And I think in many ways, you know, he's got obviously great, you know, he's got good experience. He's got a great message right now. And he has a moment now where he could really be a game changer. I mean, somebody came out, and I remember hearing today that this is basically going to be the issue of his tenure. If he can turn this around, crime around, and really get a handle on it, that would be an enormous success, not just for him, but for the city of New York. And it would send a message to other mayors across the country. It would serve as a template, you know, that you can't pander to the left. I like the fact that he goes after Black Lives Matter and says, I'm not going to acquiesce and all that other stuff. On the other hand, if he just says a lot of rhetoric, and at the end of the day, the numbers are the numbers, that's not going to be good for him. And it certainly, more importantly, is not going to be good for the citizens. Pete, thank you. You are great. Thank you. Let's go to Susan on line 3. Susan, your thoughts.
Hi there. You were speaking about the when you walk anywhere in Manhattan, the smoke from the weed everywhere is just like, and now that's going into summer, it's going to even be worse. But what really I see kids. I mean, these kids, they're not even old, like the boys, they're not even old enough to shave. And, you know, because it's now sanctioned, and I find this very dangerous for young people. They actually say up to age 26, the brain is still developing, and that this, when they do smoke weed, that quick hit of dopamine to the brain is very addictive. And it confiscates the reward center in the brain that makes them very apathetic and not ambitious. So, you know, I don't believe anyone should be in prison for this, but they should have to maybe go through some kind of a program. I mean, if they're underage, because I do believe that this very and that Mayor Adams is not doing any good for this.
Yeah, and that's a good
situation.
point, Susan. You're right. He's got to crack down on that. And the other thing, too, what I'm seeing a lot of people, I don't know, but a number of them look kind of like homeless. So, like, you're homeless and you're high. That's not a good combination. It's not a good combination for New Yorkers, and it's not a good combination, obviously, for the individual either. I agree. It's like, to make it more liberal and to make it more readily accessible is not the way. It's like, and Susan, I've also talked about, his predecessor, Bill de Blasio, who had the shoot 'em up centers, remember the shoot up centers, the injection sites. I thought that was a terrible idea because guess what was happening? There were like a lot of crimes outside the injection sites because they knew that's where the drugs were. So people were trying to come in and break in. And I think when you give people a license to continue bad behavior, you want to help them, of course. There's a lot of people, drugs is sadly a big issue and people need help and deserve help. But by making it easier and more accessible, I don't think that's the answer. And I'm with you, Susan. I'm really troubled by that. Like that combination, when you see like someone who's homeless or high or a criminal and they're high, that it is a potent for even more disaster. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, went crazy last night. Thank goodness, because another police officer was shot. Thank goodness it was just in the leg and he has been released. But Eric Adams said he has had enough. He's had enough of these repeat offenders. Take a listen.
The number of shootings that we are responding to every night is despicable. But everyone is looking at the attention that what we're doing to stop fare evasions where people are carrying guns, to stop people who are discharging weapons on our streets with no regard for the innocent people of this borough and of this city.
And then he said that New Yorkers, like the rest of America, are fed up with these career criminals and not feeling safe on the streets. Take a listen.
You have family members in this city that are saying we're tired of living in violence. And they're up against those who believe we should be spending our attention protecting criminals.
And I'm happy to hear him say that. But now what is he going to do to break this cycle and put pressure on the soft on crime DA? Let's go to Norman, line 6. Your thoughts, Norm. What do you think about it?
Hi, Rita. I think Adams, the Biden of Brooklyn, is talking a lot of hot air. Rather than looking to the federal government to save us from rarely used so-called ghost guns, how about lobbying for reinstating the way it was under Giuliani and Bloomberg, that you get caught in a crime or stop, question, and frisk with any illegal gun, you go to jail for years, no parole period. Until then, nothing will change.
Yeah, I agree. It needs to be hardcore. Norm, thank you very much. There
You're
can't be
welcome.
any gray. I'm with you. It needs to be clear, and it needs to be, here is the punishment, and if you do it, you will do the time. None of this sort of pass after pass after pass. Let's go to Teacher June on line 1. Go ahead, Teacher June. Teach us.
Hi. It was great to see you in December at the Temple dinner again.
Thank you. Oh, June, I remember now. Absolutely. I was so honored to be there. Thank you.
I was so happy to see you. First of all, I agree with your previous caller that Rikers should be more strict and start solitary confinement, and also have a section of the island or the building for mental, rehabilitation with social workers. And many states should reinstate the death penalty.
You know what? It's an interesting point, June, because you're right. If they know that there will be severe punishment, then maybe they'll be worried. June, so great to hear from you.